Since the dawn of civilization, color has whispered messages we were never meant to hear. In the temples of ancient Egypt, priests wrapped in gold and crimson believed that hues could bend the human mind, that a single shade could command obedience, awaken fear, or summon worship. They called it sacred science. Today we call it marketing, but the symbols remain the same. Red, they said, stirs the pulse. It triggers action, submission, even sacrifice. Blue, the hue of divinity and control, calms and convinces. Gold radiates authority, a color reserved for gods, kings, and corporations. These weren't random choices. They were frequencies, keys tuned to the collective psyche. And those who understood this silent code became masters of persuasion. From secret societies like the Illuminati to the mystics of the Rosicrucian order, the knowledge of chromatic influence passed through centuries, cloaked in ritual and secrecy. Then, somewhere between the cathedrals and the billboards, the language of the temples merged with the language of commerce. Today, every logo, every screen, every brand you trust speaks that ancient dialect of control. Have you ever felt strangely drawn to a product, a symbol, a flag, without knowing why? Did you ever wonder who decided what each color would make you feel? What you'll discover now may surprise you, because behind every tone of red, blue, and gold lies a message older than history itself. Write in the comments, "I see the hidden signs," and stay with us. The next layer of this spectrum hides a revelation that was never meant for the public eye. 1929, a year remembered for economic collapse, but few recall what else was born in the shadows of that crisis. While the world's attention was fixed on Wall Street, deep beneath London, the Tavistock Commission began a different kind of experiment. Not with money, but with minds. Hidden inside grey laboratories, groups of volunteers were placed before glowing screens, each pulsing with controlled frequencies of red, blue, and gold. Their task was simple: watch, listen, respond. Yet the true purpose was never revealed. Behind those walls, scientists and psychologists whispered about collective conditioning. They weren't testing color preferences. They were mapping obedience. As political messages flickered across those screens, the colors shifted in rhythm, like a silent symphony of manipulation. Tavistock's notes, later sealed under social influence research, revealed something chilling. Emotional response could be engineered. The mind could be tuned like an instrument, and the key was color. Red increased compliance under fear. Blue strengthened trust even in false authority. Gold triggered reverence towards symbols of hierarchy. When combined, they didn't just persuade, they programmed. The subjects left the rooms believing they had made their own decisions, but every choice had already been planted. That was the birth of what we now call psychological influence, the seed of modern mind control. Years later, these findings quietly migrated into the hands of new architects, marketing agencies funded by philanthropic foundations with Masonic ties. The same families that financed psychological warfare in Europe began investing in advertising. Coincidence? Hardly. They understood that wars of the future wouldn't be fought with bullets, but with perception. Through television screens, movie posters, product packaging, the color spectrum became a silent weapon. And soon, the symbols followed. The golden arches, the blue eye, the red circle, recurring patterns that embedded themselves in the global subconscious. You've seen them. You trust them. You even crave them. But behind their comforting glow lies forbidden knowledge. The understanding that emotional triggers can replace free will. Have you ever wondered why some brands feel safe? Why certain political movements feel right, even when your logic disagrees? It's not accident, it's architecture. The same Tavistock patterns, repackaged for a digital age. Every scroll, every image, every flash of color speaks a hidden language that your conscious mind cannot resist. Some call it science, others call it sorcery, but those who designed it, they called it evolution, control through beauty, submission through light, and we accepted it because it felt good. Write in the comments, "I will not be controlled," but that's only the surface. What if those early experiments didn't end in 1929? What if they simply went underground, evolving, adapting, until the screens we stare at today became the new laboratories? Look around you. The world glows in the same shades: deep blue, radiant red, shimmering gold. The banks that hold your money, the governments that claim to protect you, the tech giants that know your thoughts before you do, all wrapped in identical colors. as if painted by the same invisible hand. Coincidence or coordination? In Mind-Quart, a classified memo from the Bilderberg Commission surfaced briefly before disappearing again into the vaults of strategic communications. It mentioned a term most people had never heard before: chromatic synchronization. Behind the sterile language was something far more deliberate, a theory that colors could align human emotion with institutional authority. Blue for control, red for action, gold for trust. Combine them correctly, and you could command nations without ever raising your voice. The corporations that dominate your daily life did not rise alone. Many shared board members, consultants, and silent investors from the same circles. Those old families, those secret societies whose symbols trace back to the Rosicrucians and beyond. To them, color was not design, it was code. Each shade became a vibration, each logo a sigil carrying intent. To the public, it was branding. To the initiated, it was ritual. They studied the psychology of attention, the pulse of dopamine, the threshold of compliance. Then they weaponized beauty. The blue of your favorite app calms the mind, slows resistance, increases scrolling time. The red notifications spike anxiety, a microdose of urgency that pulls you back in. Gold accents make you trust the message, the source, the product. The language of commerce became the liturgy of mind control. And yet, the deeper you look, the more you notice repetition. The triangle, the eye, the circle, always framed by the same chromatic trinity. Hidden symbols layered within the corporate emblems of progress. These are not random choices made in creative meetings. They are echoes of ancient codes, drawn from the same occult blueprints that guided the temples of old. Symbols charged through ritual, reintroduced through screens. The goal was never to sell. It was to align perception, to synchronize billions of minds under one luminous pattern. Behind every glowing interface, behind every smiling commercial, lies a silent pulse, the rhythm of obedience. The same psychological influence Tavistock tested decades before now flows through global design, shaping not only how we see, but what we believe. Have you ever wondered why every major platform looks familiar? Why each brand feels strangely comfortable? It's because you've been trained to trust those hues, to surrender under their harmony. The dark agenda doesn't shout. It whispers through color, through light, through repetition. The unseen speaks in wavelengths your eyes adore, and your mind obeys. Write in the comments, I see the signs, but that's only the surface. Because if color can command emotion, imagine what happens when light itself becomes programmable, when the next evolution of design no longer paints your world, but rewrites your perception. Throughout history, every revolution has worn its own costume. Not chosen by chance, but crafted with intent. Red for rage and courage, black for defiance and death, white for peace and rebirth. On the surface, they look like symbols of hope or rebellion. But beneath that surface lies an ancient formula. A chromatic code designed to move entire populations as one body, one pulse, one will. The Jesuit manuscripts of the 17th century describe colors not as decoration, but as vibrations of the spirit. To them, red was the frequency of sacrifice. Black absorbed energy and fear, binding people together through shared darkness. White, when used in contrast, invoked purity and submission. They knew that emotion could be summoned through pigment, and where emotion could be guided, obedience could be shaped. The church called it divine order. Centuries later, governments called it mass psychology. The French Revolution, blood-red banners waving over the crowd. The same hue echoed in the Russian uprisings, in the flags of movements that promised freedom but delivered new forms of control. Each time, the emotional charge of color became a catalyst. Red spilled into the streets, not just as fabric, but as programming. The people believed they were fighting for truth, unaware they were following an invisible rhythm scripted by minds who understood how to manipulate the unseen. As centuries passed, the technique evolved. Corporations adopted the palette of revolutions and rebranded it as progress. Activism became marketing, propaganda became design. Blue to pacify, green to promise renewal, black to symbolize rebellion in products sold by the very institutions once opposed. The same pattern, the same frequencies, wrapped in new language, yet driven by the same dark agenda. Behind every campaign that moves hearts, there's a study. Behind every movement that awakens souls, there's data. The Tavistock archives spoke of this too. Psychological influence through color harmonics. They proved that hues could bypass logic, directly influencing the limbic system, the seat of emotion and decision. It was no longer necessary to convince the mind, they could simply tune it. Hidden symbols merged with this palette: the clenched fist, the rising sun, the dove. Icons repeated until they lost meaning but retained power. When fused with color, they created what ancient alchemists once called sigils of control. Forms that trigger belief without thought. These are not coincidences on posters or flags. They are the continuation of occult rituals disguised as culture. Think of how every uprising now looks cinematic, unified, aesthetically perfect. That isn't chaos, it's choreography. Behind the smoke, behind the chants, lies a carefully orchestrated energy field, guided by those who mastered the psychology of crowds. Secret societies learned that controlling rebellion was more efficient than suppressing it. Let the people scream, as long as they scream in the right color. Have you ever asked yourself why your heart races at the sight of certain flags, or why solidarity feels so familiar, almost rehearsed? Perhaps it's because you were trained to feel it. Perhaps emotion itself has become their most refined form of mind control. Right, I will not be controlled. But that's only the surface, because when colors can command emotion and symbols can channel belief, what happens when both are merged with light, pure, digital, pulsating light, beamed straight into the subconscious of a connected world? There are colors you've never seen, not because they don't exist, but because someone decided you shouldn't. Hidden frequencies, erased from the spectrum, filtered from your devices, buried in the algorithms that shape what your eyes are allowed to perceive. We were taught that light ends at violet, that the visible spectrum is complete. But what if that's a lie? What if the limits of sight were drawn not by nature, but by design? In 1957, inside the archives of the Hermetic Society of London, researchers stumbled upon something extraordinary. Reports labeled chromatic anomalies, classified. These documents described a series of experiments conducted by state-sponsored labs across Europe and the United States. The goal: to test how specific color frequencies, invisible to standard optics, could alter human behavior. Calm, fear, collective euphoria, each response tied to a shade no longer found on any digital screen. They called them forbidden tones. According to those records, one of these tones, a deep resonance between indigo and infrared, could induce unity, even obedience, among large crowds. Another, faintly golden yet unseen, triggered sudden bursts of emotion, tears without reason, visions without memory. The governments involved soon labeled them psychological hazards and erased every trace from public technology. Monitors, cameras, and film emulsions were recalibrated to omit them, an entire slice of perception deleted. But the occultists within the Hermetic circles knew better. To them, these weren't just colors, they were gateways. Each frequency corresponded to a vibration of consciousness, an emotional key that could open collective states of awareness or subservience. Ancient texts had already hinted at this. Egyptian murals depicting halos of hues no longer reproducible. Tibetan scrolls painted in pigments that seemed to shift under candlelight. The lost spectrum wasn't myth, it was memory. After 1957, the silence was absolute. Artists who claimed to rediscover these tones were discredited or vanished into obscurity. Printers who tried to reproduce them found their machinery mysteriously failing. And as color shifted from pigment to pixels, control became effortless. The eye could now be coded. Every display you own, your phone, your TV, even the billboard you glance at in passing, operates within an approved range, a spectrum cleansed of the frequencies that once stirred the soul. Yet fragments remain. Old stained glass windows that hum under sunlight, forgotten frescoes whose blues pulse differently in photographs. Those who've seen them describe a feeling, not sight but sensation, as if the mind briefly touches something vast, then recoils. Governments call it visual noise. The Hermetic orders call it forbidden knowledge. And the corporations that built your digital reality, they call it color management. Have you ever wondered why some sunsets look less vivid than you remember as a child? Or why digital art feels perfect yet soulless? Perhaps it's because the missing tones have been stripped away, replaced with safe wavelengths that pacify rather than awaken. Every update, every calibration tightens the cage around the human eye. The unseen is not gone. It's just hidden behind layers of coded light. But that's only the surface. Because whispers from inside old research facilities suggest that one of these lost hues has resurfaced, reappearing in a private lab's experiment in visual AI. And this time, the color didn't just affect emotion, it began to speak back. Everything converges here, now. The experiment that began with paint and pigment has evolved into photons and code. What was once studied in temples, refined in laboratories, and tested through propaganda, now pulses in your pocket, through the glass you hold, the screens you trust, the light that defines your waking world. Modern marketing no longer sells products. It sells belief. Every color, every flicker, every pixel you see is a quiet command designed to shape what you think is true. The secret societies that once whispered about the soul have traded incense for algorithms. Their rituals are now digital, hidden inside the architecture of apps, within the emotional psychology of design systems. The unseen engineers of perception no longer need to speak. They let color do the talking. Red keeps you engaged, blue earns your faith, gold makes you obey. The ancient codes have simply changed language, from symbol to signal. Think about it. The same patterns that once adorned cathedrals now decorate corporate interfaces. The same geometry found in occult rituals, circles, triangles, eyes, appears subtly in brand logos, political emblems, even streaming icons. The patterns are not coincidences. They're anchors, visual prayers to the same hidden power that's been studying humanity for centuries. They don't just want your attention, they want your devotion. This is the final evolution of mind control. Belief as design. When your perception itself becomes the medium, control no longer feels like control. It feels like choice. You trust the familiar colors. You follow the comforting light. You accept the message not because you're forced to, but because it resonates, perfectly tuned to the emotional frequency that the Tavistock researchers once mapped and the Hermetic societies once feared. The manipulation has become invisible. Every timeline, every ad, every stream of information adapts to your psychological fingerprint. The colors on your screen aren't random, they're mirrors. They reflect your triggers, your memories, your subconscious desires. Artificial intelligence now paints with emotions instead of ink, constructing personalized realities that blur truth with suggestion. It's no longer propaganda, it's belief architecture. But here's the paradox. The same frequencies used to enslave perception can also awaken it. Once you recognize the pattern, the illusion weakens. When you see the repetition, the recurring blues of authority, the ritualistic golds of influence, the seductive reds of urgency, something shifts. The spell flickers. Awareness itself becomes rebellion. To see the hidden symbols is to reclaim your vision from the shadows. Yet awakening is never comfortable. When you begin to perceive the blueprint, the true design beneath the design, your world no longer feels stable. The logos, the headlines, the colors in every screen start whispering the same message, and you can't unhear it. The question is no longer whether they are controlling the light. It's whether you are ready to look directly into it and not blink. Because somewhere, beyond the glow of your screen, lies the last spectrum, the wavelength they could never erase, a color that reveals rather than deceives. And once you see it, there is no going back. If you've reached this point, it means something inside you already knows. You've seen the patterns, felt the pulse behind the light, sensed that what we call reality is carefully orchestrated. Most people scroll past, unaware that every color, every symbol, every glow around them whispers a quiet command. But you stayed, you listened between the lines, and that changes everything. What we uncover here isn't entertainment, it's awareness. Each revelation brings us closer to what was meant to stay buried, the forbidden knowledge that the world hides behind comfort and distraction. That's why this channel exists, to keep decoding the unseen, to shed light on what secret societies tried to erase, and to help you see the hidden symbols that rule perception itself. If this message resonated with you, if you felt that strange pull of recognition, leave your mark below. Write, "I see the hidden truth." It's more than a comment. It's a declaration that you're awake, that your vision is no longer theirs to shape. Your words echo with others who are seeing through the illusion, a quiet network of minds connecting through awareness. And if you want to keep following these revelations, stay close. Subscribe not for content, but for continuity. Each video here is a new fragment of the same ancient pattern, one more piece of the design they never wanted you to decode. Liking this video helps the message travel, reaching others who might still be trapped in the glow, unaware that the light itself is speaking. The journey doesn't end here. Another layer waits. Another code hides in plain sight, inside the next story, the next image, the next revelation. The truth was never lost, only hidden in color, buried in sound, waiting for eyes that would finally see. The screen fades, but the signal remains. Keep watching, keep questioning, because once you start to see the pattern starts to see you.